All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations. I'm your host, Laura Beltonva. And if you're watching this in February, once again, happy Black History Month. If you're not watching it in February, welcome to Black Joy. You just get to be along for the ride. On today's episode, I have a person who I've looked up to for a very long time. I have the one and only Dr. Dolores Mullings. And before I read her official bio, which she was so gracious to provide me, I have to say that when I moved to St. John's, there weren't a lot of Black people, especially not in the academic spaces and the spaces that I happen to find myself in. And then I got to hear of Dr. Mullings. And as a young Black woman growing up in this province, and this province has helped me become a lot of who I am, Dr. Mullings has always kind of been this person I could look up to in spaces that I never thought I would ever get to be in or I would ever feel welcomed or comfortable in. She's kind of been like this beacon of possibility. So when I decided I wanted to focus on Black joy, it was imperative to me that she was someone who got to be on this podcast. So, with all that, I will now read you Dr. Mullings' bio. Dr. Dolores Mullings is a nationally and internationally respected senior academic leader, scholar, and keynote speaker whose work examines equity, anti racism, leadership, and institutional transformation. She most recently served as the Vice Provost of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti Racism, where she established the university wide EDI AR office, led large scale multi campus consultations, and advanced policy, governance, and community partnerships across sectors. A full professor and trained social worker, Dr. Mullings brings intersectional, racial justice centered lens to leadership, organizational change. She is the co editor of In Her Arms Love and Legacy of a Black Mother and Daughter, and is widely sought after for her candid, insightful keynote addresses on power, governance, race, gender, and institutional accountability. She's also a poet with her forthcoming collection, Black Girl in the Ring, to be released in spring of 2026. Dr. Mullings, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Laura. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And thank you for your very, very warm welcome and for those beautiful words that you said. It's really important to me that I do serve as a role model. I know in a lot of spaces we are not present. And I think it is important that all of us can see possibilities for ourselves. And sometimes those possibilities start or expand with seeing someone or people that look like us. So I'm really pleased that I was able to serve as that beacon for you and hope to continue to do so.
Thank you so much. So, the focus of this podcast, this series that I'm working on, is Black Joy. And so, I gave you the preamble when I sent you the email. So, I guess we'll roll right into it. And my first question to you is, what does Black Joy mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you for this theme of Black joy. I know that it has resonated, this theme of joy has resonated globally for our communities, no matter where we are, where we're located, what institutions we're in, whether it's prisons or schools or hospitals, playgrounds. It's not an institution, but you get what I'm saying. Black joy is at the top of our priority, and it's important. So Black joy for me, it's not transient or fleeting emotion, or a moment of happiness. It's a way of being that is fully grounded in dignity, memory, and care. And I'm talking about a memory that is vast, deep, and wide, from our recent histories to our very, very distant histories, and to the way that we care about ourselves and each other. It's also, I think, our ability to remain connected to ourselves. It's difficult to stay connected to ourselves, in at any time, you know. And it's important too for me. Black joy really, it's the importance of staying connected to one another. And as I just almost alluded to, in a world that tries to reduce Black people's lives to struggle alone,
Hmm.
it's not unusual or uncommon to see people celebrate Black activism. We need to be out there marching or picketing or demonstrating or writing letters or challenging people in the boardroom or in the wherever. And people don't see us as builders and innovators and creators and groundbreakers and those kinds of things, you know? So that's all a part of it for me. And I think the other part of Black joy for me is um, I'm going to go back to it carries a history, right? It holds so many pieces of who we are. It holds laughter alongside grief. It holds creativity alongside constraint because in a lot of the places that we're living, eating, breathing, working, are constrained. Um, you know, and love alongside loss. And I say this because in 2020, our family have we've had a lot of loss. So in 2020, we lost my nephew-in-law. He died and left two small children and a wife. Um, Almost 3 years ago, I lost my daddy. We lost my dad. 2 years ago, we lost my brother-in-law, a beloved brother-in-law. Um, and last year, we lost an auntie. And in between all of that, my daughter's husband lost an uncle and he lost his grandmother-in-law, his grandmother. I made two words. I made two different words. Through all of that, though, we were able to still find joy. And sometimes I felt like, man, how come we're laughing so much? But we found joy because that's what we do under all circumstances. I remember being at my auntie's wake in Jamaica, and I mean, what I can say is I danced so hard, you know. I danced so hard. I don't drink alcohol, and I had my bottle with me, and I was drinking. I drank so much water. I danced so hard. I think it was like 30,000 steps.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, I put up for that day because these dances they're not just 2 hours; they're like all night,
Yeah.
right? And so we were able to find joy in all of those very sad situations. So for me, it's about choosing fullness in circumstances that were never designed to support joy and doing so without apology. When I was dancing and putting up my steps, it was like I was not apologizing to a single soul. So, yeah, that's sort of like how I come to look at Black joy.
I'm gonna touch on something you said because it hit me in a way because I've never heard anyone put this word when it comes to joy. When you said like we get to maintain like our dignity in our joy, and I've never heard people link our ability to feel like our dignity is still ours, especially in a society and a culture that regularly tries to strip us of our dignity in a
Mhm.
multitude of ways.
Mhm.
And like, does it mean something very important to you when you say that our joy does kind of help us retain our dignity?
So for our people, and I will say this, maybe I don't need to say it every time, but it doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter if we're on the continent, Mother Africa, cradle of civilization, if we're in the Americas, sitting on stolen land, uh, wherever we are, in whatever place we are, we always know, down to, the blood that's running through our veins, that our dignity is important. We know that. We see it, we feel it. And so anytime, if you look at popular culture,
Hmm.
anytime you see Black people portrayed in ways where they're dehumanized, you will see the resilience and the dignity shows up because you will see the person stands up. straight,
Like as you said it, like my chest
right?
instantly did it.
Yes, right. Stand up, chest out, kind of like, it doesn't matter what you do to me. I feel my dignity, and it doesn't matter what you try to do, you cannot take that away from me. And I think that's something that I feel irritates people because when you're trying to um, treat a people as subhuman and they still show up in a way that you just do not expect, they don't know what to do,
Mhm.
really, right? So yeah, the dignity is important in all situations.
No, I'm gonna add that to the things I get to take away from this conversation. But I think
Yeah.
it also pairs perfectly for my next question for you. When you think about Black joy, how did you personally kind of vision it and understand it as something that was worth protecting?
Yeah, I thought about that question. I did quite a bit of reflection on these questions too. I understand joy as something worth protecting, right? Because it is easily eroded, it's easily taken away. Well, let me pause. Nobody can actually take away your joy, right? You could be in the worst possible situation and you can still find joy. We see that, right? But and it's easily eroded by systems that normalize people being overworked or silence, emotional depletion, um, just working until your fingers are to the bones. We one of the pictures that come to mind. I don't have a Canadian picture, mostly because our early time, some of parts of our early times in Canada is a little different.
Hmm.
But if you look at Black men on the chain gang, in the United States, you see them in the prison uniform. They're doing free labor. They're forced to do free labor. It's another way of, you know, reinventing enslavement
Hmm.
legally in the United States, right? So, the emotional depletion, treating them in a certain way, um, and still they find joy. You see them singing.
Yeah.
Sam Cooke's very famous song, Working on the Chain Gang, right? You see it there, right? So this for me is important, and especially for Black women, because as Dion Brand says, we're seen as beast of burdens. I think a number of us say that. We're seen as beast of burdens because we've always worked alongside our Black men, in this part of the world. In Mother Africa, we had, different roles that we played. Here,
Hmm.
people just, we didn't have those separation of roles. And so you saw our foremothers and sisters and grandmothers working alongside our forefathers, brothers, and so on and so forth. So Black women we do it willingly. And sometimes institutionally, we're encouraged in those positions because we can't actually access the hallowed hall um, of power unless we take on some of these roles, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so protecting joy is not about avoidance. It's really for me about boundaries and how you carve those out. It's also about um, maybe knowing when to step back or pause or just refuse to not allow whatever is happening around us, not for us to not to internalize whatever is happening around us, because it's very easy to start self-blame when you feel harmed or when you feel slighted or when something happens that didn't go the way you thought it should, or it's very easy to think it's your fault, especially when the chorus is basically
The
saying,
same.
you know but when, I think it's important for me to return to my people and to my practice and my places to restore myself, which is why I still, no matter where I go and what I do, I have a very large community with me. And how I think about that is in academic mothering. So Senator Wanda Bernard Thomas, which is also one of my mentors, and I think she mentors everybody. But but a number of us just finished writing a paper about academic mothering, and we looked at it through an Afrocentric lens.
Mhm.
And so, what we actually talked about is all the work we do to mother and mentor each other, because it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, what we see is what we talked about is how, when situation comes to us, how our community gather around us, even if we don't get along, we don't like each other, because not everybody like everybody, they
Mhm.
gather around us
Yeah.
and cover us and protect us. So it's really important to me, to be intentional about how I tap into those spaces to practice, and restore my joy. And so that would be my encouragement for other people. And I'll tell you, without this protection, it gets consumed by the very pressures that we're navigating
Yeah.
if we don't have those boundaries, because it just get eaten up like Pac-Man. I'm
Yeah.
of the age of Pac-Man, so it just gets
Some.
gobbled up, and so we have to be careful to have those boundaries and protect that joy.
I'm going to ask a question not on the list, but related to what you said. And when you're talking about boundaries, boundaries are something like are becoming ever more present for a lot of people, especially as work bleeds into life and life bleeds into work, and for us as a community. People say have boundaries, but that's a very hard thing to actually enact for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
especially as Black people, we have a tendency to give sometimes more than we have to give. If it's not to support our communities, but to prove our worth to communities that might not inherently value us automatically. So,
Yeah.
has there been anything that you have done, or like a reminder you have for yourself that you don't mind sharing with us about how you remember your boundaries and how to make sure that you're not empty?
Yeah. So, some years ago, I read this little book. I think, um, Yasmin somebody at the Sugar Jar.
Okay.
I also had the pleasure of working with Christy Rutherford, and she talked a lot about something like the Sugar Jar. And so, what both of them are speaking about is we're always drinking from the fire hose. So we're parenting our children, or parents. We're parenting people in the community or mentoring people in the community. We have our full-time jobs. We're doing part-time, 2 or 3 part-time different. We're doing all kinds of things all the time. And so for me, I know there's a term that speaks to, um, what is it? Work-life balance.
Hmm.
And what you just basically said, how do you do that? I don't think there's a separation between work and life. There really
Okay.
isn't. And I did not find it. However, what is important to me is to rest. And when I am resting, I am resting. It's interesting because until about 2 years ago, when I'm resting, I'm still working, but I'm resting. And not even 2 years ago, like most recently, when I'm resting, I'm working. But I've gotten better at it over time.
Yeah.
So, whereas years ago, I used to work through in my entire Christmas holidays. My my queens and other kids around me used to see me baking my Christmas cake and reading some book, or trying to find something, or trying to, set up my courses, or set up what funding I'm going to apply for, you know. And what I came to the realization is this, and people say it all the time: if you died today, whoever you're working for would find somebody in a heartbeat to replace you. And they may mourn, not necessarily they will, but they may mourn you for a blip in time. And some people will remember you, but the job goes on. And so I remember writing on a big piece of paper in one of my offices, one of my home offices. I said, I'm not the prime minister of any country, and I don't have to work 70 hours a week. And I took a
True.
picture of it and I walked around with it. Doesn't mean that I wasn't working extraordinary hours. I think it is important to just keep at it because it's a pattern that we need to develop. And the more you work at it, the more the pattern stays. It's like anything else, right? And so, what I do is this is what I propose, and this is what I tried to do. I wasn't always successful, but I made sure that I had a day where I could rest and recharge. When I was sick, I did not work. I felt pressured to work. Everything was calling me. Sometimes I drag myself out of bed with a headache or, can't see or whatever. And I try to move forward. And then, it's just like, no, no, because if I cannot even take a rest, it means that I'm saying to everybody else they can't take a rest either. So it's still a struggle for me.
Okay.
Still a struggle.
Okay. I really
Yeah.
like that. So you've lived life, which means you've seen hardships and you've had easy periods as well. When you think about some of the more difficult times, as you talked about when you're going through loss and all of that, how did you either find joy in those periods or maintain the joy that you had before those periods of hardship showed up?
Yeah, and I'll keep going back to my dad. When we lost my dad, it was such a shock. It was well, it shouldn't be. My dad was 89 years old. He was the most relaxed person you've ever met. I don't know how I turned out like this because I didn't learn it from him. I guess maybe from my mom. But it was just wow, it was hard. It was hard. It was hard. And I remember I didn't take any time off. I took time off to go to the funeral, and while we were making all the arrangements, I was still working. And I remember one of my colleagues said to me, "Make sure you take some time off. You need it." And I said, "Yes, yes, 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 yes," and didn't. Because those boundaries, I felt so pressured to get certain things done. And I walked into that, right? I bought into that. But having said that, I don't think joy is something I search for anymore. I don't search for it because I know it's in me, right? I can choose to be joyful, just like you choose to be happy. Because you can be absolutely miserable, you can have terrible circumstances, and you can still be happy. So I think it is something I return to. You
Okay.
see, because nobody is happy 24 hours a day. It's possible you could be, but I have not been happy 24 hours a day. So in pockets of times where I'm not joyful, I know that I can return to it. So for me, joy shows up in very small places, it's grounding ways or connections or, like I said, resting or creativity or reflecting and even remembering you like who I am beyond what I carry, because I carry a lot, right? I'm a Black woman, I'm a mother, I'm helping to care for my mom now from a distance. I've always done that for a long time. I have two twins. There are lots of things, that's happening. I sit on multiple boards, advisory committees across the country, some in other countries. Um, and in all those times, I know that I have to remember what I carry and how to carry it. So it's also rational in a way, right? So I hold joy then through my community. I will always talk about my community through our shared understanding. How you spoke initially about, you see me as somebody that helps you to aspire to certain things that you weren't sure that you could get through some of these places. And look at you. You ran for political office. Yay. Hello. Hello. So it's things like that that brings me joy, shared understanding of why it's important for us to have a Black representative in this province, right? And through other spaces where I don't have to explain or perform my resilience. When I say that I've been hurt or I feel hurt, whether it's my perception or not, or, I've been blocked or there are barriers, or, my dad or my brother-in-law passed, or my daughter's, in-laws passed, I don't have to explain. I don't really have to explain. Nobody is going to ask me, are you kidding me? Really? What's that like? Or what do you mean by that? And how do you know? Nobody is going to say that when I come to my community, right? And so I love that. And I think sometimes holding joy also means slowing down, like literally pausing, jumping off the speeding train. Sometimes it means just letting go. Let the train leave you and say thank you so much for the ride, but I'm gone. And sometimes it simply means allowing myself to feel fully human, because again, as Black people and Black women, we're not seen as humans. So I had an experience, you know I'm involved in a number of different spaces, but I had this experience. I was meeting with three people, and I had missed something. I had missed. I'm going to say a deadline. Deadline is sort of like a hard word. I'm going to say I missed a deadline. There were a number of emails that came through. I did not see it. There was something happening that, I sort of was like, I'm not sure. And when I met with the three people, one of them, really, she was awesome. She understood. I could see from her body language that she understood what I was saying. She didn't want me to explain. And then two of the people, both of these people who say that they have a lot of experience, with equity, and they understand this and that, and they have gotten mentorship from Black women, or, they've gotten awards and this and that. They were the two that didn't understand what I was talking about. And one of them says, I said, well, I was having some health conditions. I had some severe health conditions. There were three major things that happened to me last January. And I said, and those things held me up a little bit. And I said, I also in June went home to support my family, to bury my auntie. And this person said to me, well, we sent out all of that information. You could have seen it, or, so, and I just lost it at that time. I lost it because I'm like, you clearly
Excuse
don't
me?
think, you clearly don't think I'm human. Because
Yeah.
if you thought that I'm human, you would be saying, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry to hear that you had those experiences. And I can see why you missed all those deadlines, or you didn't see all those emails because of this and that. Nope. And I got very, very cross with them. Very, very cross. So that's just an experience.
Yeah.
An example of why I don't have to explain to certain people. And sometimes holding joy, as I said, is just slowing down and showing your humanity without explanation.
Yeah, no, I'm still shocked on them requiring explanation after the things
Yeah,
you were more polite than I think I would have known how to be
yeah,
in that situation.
yeah.
So my next question for you focuses on community, which is something that is very important to you and you've touched on a lot over the course of our conversation. And the question is, why does joy matter not just to you personally, but like for Black communities, big and small?
you know, I'm going to go back to my aunts. Um, Nine night. I keep going back to that because that brings me so much joy. Um, it sustains us over time. It sustains us over time. I will say this for myself and remind myself of this. It sustains us over time because what we do in some of the most dire circumstances, that we gather up together and cook and share food and eat and dance and sing. When you look at South Africa, during days of apartheid. And when you hear the voices, the a cappella of some of those young girls, women, boys, men in schools, you know, this is when, I mean, they were not seen as people. They were not seen as people during that time. They were subhuman. And all kinds of things were happening. By the way, why? While the Western world, the so called civilized world, watched, right? They found joy. They found joy. Even after witnessing some of the most horrendous things, they found joy. So without joy, resistance become unsustainable. And and care becomes transactional, you see? So when we're harmed and hurt and we're bloody and bleeding, and even sometimes we're bleeding and you can't see it outside because we're bleeding inside, we when we find these pockets of joy, nothing, nothing can touch us. Absolutely nothing. Because after we finish singing and dancing and eating and cooking and joking and whatnot, we're ready. We're absolutely ready for the next round. And come and stop us. And if you stand in our way, you're going to get run over. Even the school children, you're getting run over, right? So that's why it's important, right? And this here for me is the collective joy reminds us of our shared humanness, you know? Look at what happens when we get together and we're just joking around. We're just joking,
It's a time.
right? And laughing for no reason. Sometimes it's so infectious that we start laughing about some things and then there's another joke and everybody's laughing, clapping their heads and their hands and everything, you know? It strengthens the imagination and the creativity and hope, because a lot of times it's very easy to feel not a lot of hope, right? And it helps us to build futures that are not only about surviving harm, but about living with intentions and connections. Because we, both in Mother Africa and here in the Americas, we know what we have survived, right? We know what we've survived. Um, and in spite of all those, whatever has happened, we know that we're kings and queens. You know, we know that we're engineers, we're um, community builders, we are everything you can think of, we are. And so it really strengthens our imagination, right? And that really helps us to survive harm. And just the connection for me is important. And I sort of talked about that in sort of like how when something, so I'm going to balance it because whenever something negative happens, there's always something positive, right?
Yeah.
So I try to look at a situation not only in the negative sense, but what did I benefit? How did I benefit from being in this situation at this particular time? And that's about living with intention and also staying connected. I think the other thing I want to say is this is Black communities are in particular, joy has always been a form of knowledge. We've known that. We've known that from the schools of Timbuktu to Toronto, where I partially grew up, where people were doing all kinds of amazing things. And here now, where I live, where people are doing amazing things. I saw on Instagram the other day, Brian, who, when I looked at his art, I was like, excuse me, that is awesome. Or
So,
even Raven, who's got her company, Raven Song. And, I saw something in um, Instagram, no, LinkedIn, where she's like doing a flag raising or something. It's like people are making connections with community, they're being intentions. We're not waiting around for anybody to say, we think you ought to do that. We're just doing it ourselves. And this teaches us how to endure without disappearing. It's really important because we're being erased every day. We're seeing it all across the world, right? People are trying to erase our gains. Um, but how we care for one another across generations, how we imagine more than what we have been told to be. So, when I was, um, I don't know, but I was in high school and I said to the teacher that the guidance counselor, that I wanted to be a nurse. And she's like, mm-mm. No, she didn't say, mm-mm. This is my life. She's like, no, I don't think so. Take typing. Well, I failed typing because I wasn't interested in typing, you know? Um, and she didn't think I could. I mean, I think that guidance counselor might be surprised to see that I now have 4 degrees, 2 diplomas, certificates coming out of my eyeballs. Well, maybe not my eyeball, but I mean, so we have to know through imagination and looking at each other that what we have been told and continue to be told of what is possible is a lie, and that we're not going to believe that lie. So that gives me a lot of joy. And I see the joy in your face as I talk. I see the joy in places that I speak at. I was in Alberta, Dr. Bokola Salami. What an extraordinary scholar and mentor out there in Alberta. I don't know what the number is now about people who she's mentored, and that includes me, you know. Um, and I was out there. We had 2 events last year curated by Dr. Salami and her team. And I was in a group with Black graduate students and new or emerging academics. I felt so much joy. And when I look at the people's faces, the joy was so palpable. And people came up to me. So I wasn't just reading the room. People came up to me and verbalized, wow, this is great. I have never had this before. I've never had that before. And I said, I was grateful to have this because Dr. Andrea Davis, used to be at York University, showed me this joy and love when I was doing my PhD. So I'm grateful that I can contribute to this. So yeah, our possibilities of what we can do. As somebody said, the sky is the beginning. It's no longer the limit. And we've
Ooh,
seen it. We've seen it. Yeah.
okay. New saying. The
Mm.
sky's the beginning. Okay, that's another back pocket one for me.
Yeah.
So, as you've lived your life, how
Mm.
has the idea of joy changed for you? And so I really like this question when I thought of it. I was like, because I know what joy used to mean to me, and that's vastly different than what it means for me now. But for you,
Mhm.
has it changed? Is it the same? Has it deepened? What has it been for you?
It has changed. And I'm glad it has changed because I'm different from who I was at 15, at 22, at 35, 40, and 50, you know. So what's joyful for me is different. As I've aged, joy has become a little more quiet and intentional. So I remember, I'm going to use the Carabana word, right? When I was a lot younger, and we used to go to Carabana, right, in Toronto, largest street festival in Canada.
I think North
At the
America.
time, used to be. I
Yeah.
don't know if it still is. Um, and let me tell you something. I used to get down
Okay.
on the parade route. These days, you can't jump behind the band anymore
Yeah.
because it's no longer a street party, right? It's a parade. It changed because the paraders who have their costumes spend years building this and that and so on and so forth. People couldn't actually see them
Mhm.
because people like myself used to jump in and dance behind the bands you know and so that was just me going to party, and that was happy. It was joyful. Now, you know i I feel like back then there were moments of joy. Yeah. And felt tied to moments, maybe achievements or affirmations or movements of some kind, and being busy, right? Like when I finished high school, or when I got my first college diploma, it was like, you know. Now, joy feels less performative and more foundational, rooted in who I am. And I feel there's a lot of sun. Give me a second.
No worries.
Yeah, all of a sudden I felt like, oh, um, yeah. So I feel like, yeah, less performative and more foundational or rooted in different things. It shows up in my discernment. I know within my family, people speak about discernment in a very biblical way. That's not how I'm speaking about it. I'm able to just see things differently. Um, I know what no longer deserves energy. So not so long ago, if somebody emails me about something and I would say a bunch of things and find resources. And now it's like, no, I'm not able to do that. And I have already said this to you 4 times, or somebody within your area, I've already done that. If people change and you don't know this particular thing, might I suggest that we figure a way to maintain the knowledge so that when people leave, you still have knowledge and there's a way to pass the knowledge on, as opposed to, oh, that person is gone. No, we're gonna have to ask you again to do the same thing. And so I don't really put energies where I feel like it's not belonging. It's also in choosing depth over urgency and alignment over approval. So at this moment in time, I really don't care who approves of me or not. My community, for the most part, approves. I approve, my family approve. Everybody else, you can have your opinion, and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's for somebody who, now I'm at a very privileged position because, again, I have grown in age and experience. And so I'm not building a career. What I do remember, though, is when I was building a career and I still craved approval from people or alignment, it still did not work because it really didn't matter what I did. If I was going to get approval, I was going to get it by doing not much of anything. And if I was going to not get approval, I was going to not get it by doing not much of anything. Like, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's a game I speak for myself, it's a game I played with myself, thinking that if I did certain things, I would be more aligned with what expectations would be, and that would benefit me. And actually, that did not pan out like that for me. So you can see how joy has shifted from something I chased to something I protect. We talked about this protection a little while
Mhm.
ago, right?
Yeah.
Also, with age, I've learned that joy and grief are not opposites. We talked about that before. They're not opposites, they coexist. you know um if I look at any kind of work that I've done, I have had joys and I have had griefs, and I'm grateful for all of that because they have to coexist. This is what I'm saying is, their benefits and their feelings of harm or hurt.
Yeah.
But imagine if I didn't feel okay. So first of all, I'm not justifying being harmed. I'm not
Yes.
becoming toxic about, oh, it's okay to be harmed, right? No,
Yes.
I'm just saying, for me, being feeling harmed, whatever it is, in whatever part of life it is, whether it's personal or professional, it's an opportunity for growth and to find joy. Because for me, I've guaranteed myself that in all those situations, I can always find pockets of joys or things that I did or somebody did for me or something that happened that made me feel joyful. You see?
Hmm.
So joy doesn't erase loss or difficulty. No, it doesn't. Absolutely. It creates space to carry with them without, I would say, being overwhelmed, right? It's
Okay.
just part of life. Okay. And you observe and don't have to judge or comment even. You just observe, right? It allows me to stay present as well, to remain, again, I keep saying human because, as a Black woman, and Black people, we're often not seen as humans, right?
Yeah.
And this happens for me. I find this level of joy even in complex or painful moments, as I said, right? It's like it's there. And I don't have to search hard for it to find it, And as, somebody says, you change your state. Whether you get
Mm,
up and jump up, or you jump on your trampoline, or you go out for a run or a walk, or shovel your snow, or walk in the path, or go for a cold dip or something, you change your state. You find some joy, right? And I think most importantly, joy has become collective for me. It really has. It's less about my own happiness and more about my shared ease, laughter, and care. And that I am looking forward to being able to be in those spaces and create those spaces. Joy lives in relationships, in communities, all our communities, right? In the freedom to be fully myself without explanation, as I said before,
mhm,
fully self expressive, without covering myself down with a lid or being afraid that, if my tone of voice doesn't work for somebody, they're going to run screaming, you know, or, that any kind of language I can use is that, if I don't show up a certain way, somebody's going to be offended. Or
mhm,
if somebody doesn't agree with me, then, all hell breaks loose. It's okay. It actually is okay. And wherever you are in life, whether it's you're starting a career, you're still in high school, you're in diapers, whether you're older or younger and we're in diaper, you can still find joy somewhere. That for me is the gift of aging. Joy that is steadier, wiser, freer, flexible, and deeply anchored in who I am and in my people. And the other piece for me is the sustainability of that. It's unparalleled. It is unquestionable. Um, and how do they say no holds barred? No, I think that's maybe that's the term I want. It's just there is there's no light that can be shone on this kind of joy to make it brighter because it's so bright already. There is no amount of water can be dashed on it to dim it. No, no. I'm not saying that it's there 24 hours, but I'm saying
yeah,
that it's there in abundance
yeah.
and cannot ever be challenged. Yeah, yeah. That's what it
Wow.
is for me right
Just gonna take a minute for that one. That was
now.
no,
I
that
am very joyful. I feel very joyful right now. I'm just like, yeah.
no, that was beautiful. And I think it leads into my question for you next, and you touched on it already in what you said. And I was like, how would you share this idea of how joy has changed for you and how it has become more a thing of sustenance and calm and rest and not just attached to specific moments? How would you share this idea of Black joy with younger generations who are still maybe in those momentary pieces of joy?
It's how I behave. It's how I behave. So if I'm in a space and something happens that's not the best, people are unhappy. If I am spazzing out at everybody and if I'm yelling at people or shouting or even if I'm not doing those things, but if I'm not showing up in true honor, if I am showing up as a person who is less than who I am, then nobody learns anything. The only thing they learn for sure is, oh, she says one thing and she does the other thing. I'll share with you. You see that I'm a storyteller already, right? I'll share
Love
with
it.
you that I remember when I went into school, when I went back to do my PhD, I was in my 30s. No, when I went back to school to start university, I was in my late 30s. And I remember being so excited about the literature that I was reading. Dr. Pat Danzer introduced me, our class, but I will say introduced me because that was my only Black professor, right? And Dr. Danzer introduced us to some Black scholars and the work that they were doing. And I was like, wow, I've never seen or heard anything like this before. And it was like, yes, they're speaking to me. And then I met them, some of them, and I'm like, oh my word, these people are not, they're not who they say they are. The writing speaks to me,
Yeah.
but how they show up does not connect to the things that they write. And
Okay.
so for me, that's important. Now, I'm not talking about perfection because no one is perfect,
No.
nor do I expect anyone to be perfect. But it's going to be important to model what I say and what I write. It doesn't mean that I'm going to allow people to push me over and run over me and I stay meek. No. In fact, I'm a warrior, proud warrior in every sense of the word. And any person that I've ever worked with, anybody, they know that I'm a warrior. So there's no question about that. So I will behave in the way that I say, but I also encourage and mentor. I have a lot of people that I'm mentoring right now, formally mentoring as well. Like,
Yeah.
those names will remain as is. And that those are some of the things I share with them, especially new Black women academics, who are in these spaces and where they're expected to take on, be the equity lead, sitting on the multicultural committee. When anything goes sideways, those are the first people they call. Um, you know, I have reviewed a number of tenure applications over the years for full professor and associate professor. And every single time I have said to in their letter, it is sad and absolutely disgusting that these emerging professors are asked, or I'm going to put allowed in quotation marks, to take on this level of labor for these kinds of very tough things because they don't show up well on your promotion and tenure file. You see?
Yeah.
So in my mentorship, I help people to see that you actually don't have to be pigeonholed into being the equity lead because you make a lot of enemies and there's not a lot of benefits in the grand scheme of things. Not to say that there isn't any, not a lot. So I do those kinds of things. I'm called upon quite often to speak formally and informally. I accept almost always. Um, and my priority right now is, in terms of mentorship, is young Black women because I continue to give and give and give. And, I have learned so much about joy, in the academic space that I believe it's a responsibility to give back to my community. So I do that as well. So everybody's going to be different. How I approach each person is different. And my approach is mentorship is mutual. They know something I don't know. I know something they may not know. And so we mentor each other and I take leadership in some areas. We do things together. And I listen a lot and try to normalize some of what I hear because I remember being there and feeling like my head was stuck on top of the ceiling with my legs dangling. And if I had mentors or somebody that I felt was in my corner, I wouldn't have felt that way. And the other thing for me, I would say, is there's nothing worse than being in a space where you feel like nobody have your back. And so I want to be that person for people to have their backs. Even if I'm not in that specific space, I can still hold space for them and I can have their back. That's just really important. And when I say have your back, I mean, there are lots of people who are friendly and nice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and I write about that in my poetry too, is that they're friendly and nice and they'll have all kinds of things to say about all kinds of things. let me say, they will have all kinds of nice things to say about all kinds of situations. And then you're ambushed and you're wondering, oh, what happened there? You know? So I want to be that person to help other people not feel like, oh, what happened there? That gives me a lot of joy.
I think that kind of answers my next question, but I'm still going to pose my next question to you anyway.
Yeah.
And it's, how do you spread joy? Is it something that you are intentional about, or is it something that you've realized that just because you happen to be in that space that people are more joyful?
I spread joy very deliberately and intentionally in how, as I said, how I show up, how I enter a space, how I leave a space. I'm very committed to when I go into certain spaces, I leave it with more joy than I, I left it. So one of the things I love is music. And I realize a lot of people love music too. So sometimes what I do is I introduce music in my talks. I get people up to dance, to clap, to sing, to, talk to each other. And, when you see the joy in people's faces when they're doing something like that, simple, or I do something very simple, sometimes it is like you ask somebody, do you want some water? And they'll say, yep, or maybe, or if you see somebody who's burdened down with something, ask them, can I help you? I'm going your way too. Like, can I help you? I was visiting my mama in her nursing home uh, a week or so ago. I forget now. And I met this older woman who lives on the opposite side of my mom's nursing home. It's sort of like a twin
Mhm.
place. One is independent living and one is a nursing home. And this woman was coming from No Frills. She went shopping. She's coming from No Frills, and I saw her at the back door of the um, the complex.
Mhm.
And I said, hello, mommy, because when they're a certain age, I just say mommy, right, or mom.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm waiting. She was Trini. She says, in her language, she says, I'm waiting for somebody to open the door for me. And to help me get over the bump. I'm like, I'm here. I can help you. The woman had this beautiful smile on her face, something as simple as that. And it was deathly cold that day. And so I took my time. I opened the door for her. I walked with her. I helped her walk her over the pile of snow because she was
Mhm.
afraid of that too. And she's telling me, okay, no, you can go on, you can go on. It's okay. Okay. So I gave her her space. I went on, but I waited for her inside the building now that she's going to get into because I wasn't quite sure, right? So I
Mhm.
waited inside the building, and guess what? The door to get in that building was not ajar. So I had to go back and open the door for her. We had this great conversation about what's wrong with people. We weren't seeing the joy there then, but then I opened the next door for her. You can see there was a series of doors to
Yeah.
open, right?
Yeah.
And she gave me absolute beautiful blessings, thanked me and said that I actually made her day and that she felt happy. And I was like, I'm happy too. Thank you. So it's what you do. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. And what I'm really committed to doing is not talking people out of their feelings. Because to me it's the worst when I'm feeling not joyful and somebody's telling me about positive, be this and that. I want to get one of those pies that you see people throw on TV and help them with a pie, right? I'm like this, so that's part of how I am mindful about and intentional about how I share joy is that I don't talk people out of their feelings, but I help them to see an opportunity for something differently. You see? Yeah.
Okay. So I have one secret question for you, and it's the final question of our podcast, and I never give it to guests beforehand. And so it's a surprise, but it's one that with everyone I've interviewed, their answers have been from A to Z as to the way they answer this. And so
Yeah.
it's, You get a time machine to go back to talk to a younger version of yourself. If there was anything you could tell her as you now that you think would help her get to this point, that would keep her going when things seem bleak, or any of that that you want her to remember about the idea of joy, what would you want her to know?
I know exactly what I would say. I would say, keep going, honey. Keep going. You are not going to be surprised at what you see at the other end, but a lot of other people are going to be surprised. You just keep going, hold on to your faith, keep going, do not give up. Just keep going. That's all I would tell her, because I was a firecracker anyway when I was younger, you know?
Okay.
Um, and so that's what I would tell her. I would just encourage her to keep going. Maybe another thing I would want to say to her is, she doesn't have to be perfect. She really doesn't have to be perfect. And to without, reach out for help without shame, without shame. And maybe the last thing would be, don't take it personal and don't sit in it, because it'll kill you. It'll stomp your growth. It'll chill your spirit and damage your soul.
Okay.
And that people are doing things most of the times the best that they can and what they know. And even if you don't agree with them, just keep it moving. Yeah. That's what I tell her.
Okay. Well, Dr. Mullings, that's the end of the podcast. That's the final question. I want to honestly, sincerely thank you for taking your time to have this conversation, to have this chat. I know that I'm walking away from this more joyful, absolutely, with little things that I know will help me through harder moments, and just remembering that it is possible. There is joy at the end of it, regardless of what the path currently looks like.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take the advice you have for younger you, to not let other people dull my shine. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
not personal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank you for sharing this, not just with me, but with everyone who's going to watch and listen to this. You've definitely lifted some spirits today.
Mhm. Thank you so much, so much for inviting me to have this conversation. I've never had one of these conversations before, so there's always a first time for everything. And I really appreciate um, the opportunity to speak freely, and to speak specifically on the theme of joy, because it is important. And thank you so much for welcoming me, and for not putting any pressure, not making any assumptions, and for creating a space that I feel really honored. I feel honored here. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's the end of today's episode. I hope you get to take away from it as much as I do. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Courageous Conversations, and I'll catch you all again next time. We're done.